Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Gravity Circuit. In the last part we went after the patch circuit trace, and before we head after our next trouble circuit, there's some things I gotta show off. Up here, hidden above the stage select, is an entire set of 2 rooms that I believe were added into a later update. First off, we got the training room. You got a training dummy here that you can smack senseless, albeit it's also where you can get a very good visual indicator for what the combo meter I've been talking about throughout the LP is, and how you can let it build up but also keep the damage going without pressing them so hard that they enter their invincibility phase. Good place to learn to do that. And then over here on the other side is another completely optional thing. I'll let the computer itself say what it is. Registration complete. Welcome, Gravity Circuit. We are COM, the program governing the Combat Memory Bank. It is our duty to collect your combat data and catalog them here. With these records, you can re-experience your past encounters. Feel free to use these facilities to hone your skills. To begin, step inside and choose which encounter to simulate. Your best times will be saved on record. Good luck. So, this is a time trial mode to refight any boss you fought up to this point in the campaign, on top of some extra little gauntlets you can do once you fought a lot of them. There is actually a reason to do that, but you can't really do that until post-game, and it's tied to another thing we got a moment ago. We got a secondary pallet ship. But before we talk about that, let's head after our next boss fight. In specific, we're going to be heading after the warehouse area. Many of the city's computer systems are under constant hacking attacks. There's only one circuit capable of such malice, Hash. Our firewalls can keep him from entering our systems, but who knows for how long. Based on the patterns of his attacks, a nearby warehouse is his likely location. But knowing his tricks, he's probably hiding somewhere. Possibly even in the cyberspace. So go after him and put an end to his hacking attempts. I just don't want him snooping through my files. Take on this mission? Very well. Prepare for transfer. In general, I think this game has really good character design for all of the Rebel circuits, and even the generic NPC bots back at the Guardian Corps HQ. Hash is probably my second favorite overall, though. I love the four-armed look so much. I think my favorite overall is Trace, though. I don't know why, I've just always liked her look. So what makes this level a little bit unique is that while it starts looking a little bit like, was it Blast Hornet from X3? A little bit here with the warehouse look. We're quickly going to get thrown into cyberspace like Colonel himself brought up, at which point, it more so resembles that one stage from Mega Man 04. If you know, you know. It doesn't happen too often from my memory in the recording, but there's a couple times I do recommend you just pause and approach your situation more carefully. Taking a look at what enhancement chips you've gotten thus far throughout the game, and see how they might benefit you in your current situation. Extending your attack range, for instance, can be very good in this particular stage. So what makes cyberspace in this game kind of weird is that it's sort of a darkness level, in that you can't see the platforms you're going to jump on from a distance. With that said, once you get within about half a screen length of them, they do physically appear. They do some tricky stuff with this, though, where sometimes they'll force you to jump into a situation where it looks like you're going to hit spikes, but you're not actually going to do it. Or what looks like the correct way might be a dead end like that, so if you're just rushing straight forward, you'll run into spikes. I actually like this a lot, which is weird because it's sort of a darkness mechanic, which is usually my least favorite in platforming to begin with. But because of how this particular version of it works, it's not very stop and go, so I actually like it a lot. So the other thing this stage has going on is on and off switches that will turn on and off platforms of that specific switch's color. So like the square switches will turn off square platforms and square spikes, or at least make them swap states. And the way to find quite a few secrets in this particular stage is to navigate swapping those at the right time, checking what level design you've been through thus far, and that you can re-access to find the secrets. Like, for instance, one of the collectibles in the stage is up here, but I need to hit the blue switch first to get the pallet ship here. With that said, due to specifically the structure of the latter third or so of the stage, maybe latter half, this ends up actually being one of the longer main Rebel Circuit stages in the game. Counting boss fight and cutscene for that. With that said, again, you don't really feel the length of the stages in this one compared to some other platformers, but mind you, that is largely also a personal thing. Like, I don't feel the length in this as much because it's a lot more directly Mega Man core, versus Shovel Knight, which, due to all the Castlevania DNA in that, you definitely feel some of the extra length in my case there. And again, that's not a bad thing, it's just something you notice. Especially as stages go on long and long, and if you're dying a lot in them, they usually start to feel that all the more. And that's something I think is much easier to run into in Shovel Knight in specific. Because again, this game can be... it has its moments of hardness. But overall, I think it's relatively approachable. Even for a game of this genre type, which I know a lot of people find Mega Man likes hard. No, I don't anymore, at least. Another wrinkle they're throwing in here are teleporter orbs. Simply put, you jump in one, you jump out another. I think usually go in the same direction. The slightly dangerous thing about those is that there's going to be times where there's several on screen, and you might think you're going to jump out of one, but you're probably going to jump out of another. For instance, there, you might think you're going to jump out the bottom one because they're on the same altitude, but no, you have to fall into that one from the first jump from there. It can be a little dangerous, but it doesn't take too long to get used to. Same with the key locks here. You just punch the key program several times, and you break through the firewall. We do have another thing to worry about in this stage, though, and that is effectively motion tracking lasers. When you walk through one of those, an enemy wakes up and shoots you. Pretty straightforward. One of the more dastardly hidden areas here is beneath this particular section. And you actually have some pretty tight grappling jumps to make here. Notably, whenever you mess up a platforming section here and fall into the spikes, Hash himself shows up and laughs at you. And there's actually an achievement for punching him while he's doing that, which I just think that's funny. And up here's our burst limit boost for this particular stage. Oh! Something about those exact moments where you're that close and get teleported just that much further away are the extra level insulting that hurts just enough, but I would never want games to not have those, as they're funny as hell. So the latter half of Hash's stage is 4 different teleporters. We need to go into all of them to clear the stage, but each of them are 4 different platforming sections that focus on different things, like this is a vertical teleporter sphere room. At the end of every single one of them is a key. We need to break the keys in order to reach the area. Reach the boss fight, rather, the end of the level. Which I guess is the area, but to be more specific, you know? Each of them also has, I believe, a single hostage each, so you need to make sure you're looking around if you're trying to get them all, unless you're trying to go for a low percent run, in which case, hey, cool. I think that's technically one of the achievements anyway, so you might as well, I guess. Speaking of which, might as well talk about the achievements the game has really quick. It has a lot of the usual ones you'd expect, like a Platinum Trophy equivalent, getting all the data chips for the compendium, rescuing all 64 hostages, investigating 2 specific hostages that show up in the hub in a specific way. There's one for punching the tube in the med bay until they force you to pay, which will show up down the line. There's one for defeating any boss using a burst technique to finish him off. One for defeating a boss without taking damage. And then one for clearing a stage, including boss fight, without clearing damage. There's one for beating all 8 of the main bosses. There's one for beating the game, period. There's one for getting every single enhancement chip. There's one for every burst technique. Beating 1,000 enemies, rather, is one. There's also one for defeating 100 enemies with thrown objects, which is why I just said the number 100 instead. There's one for beating the game in New Game Plus mode. There's one for completing the game in Circuit mode. I haven't done either of those to my memory. There's one for using 100 burst techniques. There's one for grabbing an enemy shield and throwing it 10 times, which we actually got in this very LP. This room is really weird, by the way. Not only is your position on the ceiling where you're actually controlling from, but that also changes where up and down is on your D-pad, so ducking is now pressing up. One of the modifiers we saw at the start of the game does this for every single level, and it's weird. There's another achievement for getting all the health upgrades, as well as one for all the burst upgrades. There's one for surviving the burst technique of a boss fight 10 times in a single fight. Which, now that the combat simulator's there above the stage select, that's the best way to do that, because I think you can count that there. There's one for clearing any stage after the intro stage without using the repair stations, so you just keep on moving past and don't even jump on it. There's one for overkilling 250 enemies, which is turning them red and then punching them until they explode, period. There's one for investigating a certain NPC in the hub a certain way as well. That's different from the one we talked about earlier. There's one for beating a boss without using a burst technique, which is actually really rough. There's one for clearing a stage as well without doing so, which for platforming reasons is especially rough. There's one for beating a stage after the intro stage without taking any hazard damage at all, which if you just take your time isn't that bad. The next several are one for every single one of the Rebel Circuit stages where you get through them without getting hit by a specific hazard within them. For instance, back in the Steelworks, it's not getting hit by a laser. For the Junkyard, it's not getting hit by the purple goop. Then it's not getting frozen in one particular stage, it's not touching electrified surfaces in another, not touching a specific hazard in the highway stage we'll be doing next time. Blah, blah, blah. If you see a main hazard that's exclusive to a stage, it's probably that one you need to avoid getting hit by. There's one for hitting hash in this very stage, like I brought up earlier in this very part. There's one for avoiding a specific boss fight down the line's attacks in a line. There's one for beating a specific endgame boss fight without dying. The next two after that are avoiding specific attacks during the final boss, actually. There's one that involves something in the hub we haven't shown off yet. There's one for effectively helping everyone and doing all the things and then beating the game. There's one for throwing an object spawned by a boss back at them, which there's only a couple places you can really do that. But then you reach the really rough ones. Beating the game without any health upgrades, beating the game without any burst upgrades, that's two separate ones, beating the game without purchasing additional enhancement chips, so the one that you get from the nurse you can get, but the rest you cannot at all. There's one for beating the game without purchasing additional burst techniques, which that is especially rough sounding. And then there's one for beating a stage with just your hook shot. By the sound of it though, it looks like you can probably do that one with the intro stage. You would just need to remember you cannot punch at all, which there's a point for that where I think that'd be really rough. Although with the specific booster chip setup we have going on where you get pulled in, that might not be too bad. It depends on whether or not they count the second hit of getting pulled into an enemy by it as the hook shot still. Overall, not the worst sounding compared to a lot of games I've done. I probably will actively get the rest of the achievements / trophies at some point, because I care about this game enough to do so. Especially because there's none that sound like they'd be beating the game in under 90 minutes on New Game Plus kind of stuff due to me combining runs and Shovel Knight. All these sound like they'd be pretty straightforward. With that though, let's go take the fight directly to Hash since he's been mocking us the entire level in some form or another.
What a bothersome intruder you are, Kai. Don't you realize just how much I worked on those traps?
I don't have time for your games, Hash.
Games? You single-processor fools don't understand my artistry.
Your actions are harming others. I cannot call that art.
You underclocked scrap, clouding your senses with unnecessary details. I believe some calibrations are in order.
Hash having forearms is so fun, but this boss fight can be a little rough because his main thing is teleporting. He'll leave several clones behind that will also throw projectiles at you. Additionally, he can spawn spikes on various platforms to prevent you from reaching him. He can send out various bits and bytes out in a increasing radius circle, similarly to certain Wily fights from over the years. His burst technique's kind of a fun one, though. Pattern reflection, he spawns boxes, and then a bunch of spikes show up. Get in the boxes to avoid them. I just find that very fun to get around. I think it's almost always that exact pattern, maybe sometimes it goes in reverse. But you really get to see why I really like Piercing Drill in this particular fight, because that's like 3 shots of damage in really quickly that don't have a lot of combo value attached to them, so you can just go in for more damage immediately after that in most cases. He can also just shoot at you directly a couple ways. I think he has a version that actively does an explosion effect of some sort, but I seldom see him do that one in specific. Also, if you knock him off the platform, he does come back up.
Incomprehensible. My calculation said I was sure to win. Guess the contingency plan will come in handy. Soon. Very soon.
Hash's stage is pretty fun. There are some parts of it that would probably be very annoying to a lot of people. particularly trying to predict where the spikes are going to show up next as you move throughout the stage. But because it effectively works like a lantern around you, I find it pretty fun to work around.
Colonel, sir? Is something wrong?
Huh? Oh, it's nothing. Just some old servos acting up, I think.
Alright, if you say so, sir.
Good work out there. The city's computer systems are back online. And even better yet, my personal files are safe. Let me know when you're ready to tackle the next mission. It's okay, Colonel, I don't need to know about your porn. We have 2 pallet ships this time around because we got one in the combat training room. The one we got from Hash's stage is Scheming Pink, which when you press up and jump, allows you to phase through objects for a little bit, so if you're trying to avoid attacks, it's not that bad an option. What it can be a bad option for that, though, is Fading Onyx, which I believe just makes you take double damage, which, not my favorite, but for challenge runs it's there, I suppose. Next up, time for some more enhancement chips. I'm getting the energy multiplier, which increases the amount of burst energy every single pellet you grab restores. So using this in tandem with the first enhancement chip you got in the game can be very effective if you like using burst attacks. Then I'm getting the protection timer, which increases the length of your invincibility frames after taking damage. So if you're trying to be reckless, very good. And finally, I get the emergency accumulator, which if you get hit and you have burst energy left over, it'll eat into that rather than your health, as long as it's not a hazard type damage. Enemies will absorb it, not like spikes.
Oh gosh, you went to cyberspace? I'm jealous. That place seems like a dream come true to a data nerd like me. After the first Virus Army conflict, when my mentor Hash disappeared, we lost all access to cyberspace, and with it, most of our data. That's why Alf here started using these books, as he calls them. They're fine, but without cyberspace, our historical records are out of reach. Once this is all over, can you maybe help me with getting to cyberspace, pretty please?
I mean, if you give me more discs like that, sure.
I never understood why Hash held such tight control over the cyberspace. We always had to ask him for access to any files we wanted to study. He was fine with it most of the time, but he never let us study any files older than us bots here at the HQ. I wonder, was he trying to hide something from us?
Maybe. Wouldn't be the most out of reach idea. Ah, you've been busy. I heard you confronted the cipher circuit. Hash always was a calculative one, constantly scheming something. Unfortunately, his elaborate plans weren't exactly productive. Instead, they were just dangerous obstacle courses for others to tackle. And when someone cleared them, he'd throw a big fuss about it. It was like his main drive was to avoid getting outsmarted. A shame, really. He could have used his intellect better. But I think there's never anything about the past. Alright, so Hash's 2 burst techniques are both really good. One's the hologram trap, which allows you to place down a hologram that can absorb attacks for a little bit but will explode after a short period, so it works as sort of a trap. While Clone Array is a little deceptive, the way it's described makes it sound like the Shadow clones from Ninja Gaiden 2 if you ever played the NES game. But it's nowhere near as busted as that. I believe it just boosts your damage in some way across the board. It's still pretty good, especially with certain ships, but not as good as it sounds like it could be. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 6, we're heading after another favorite Rebel Circuit of mine. See you guys then.